Want to create professional motion graphics and animations in Adobe After Effects? Here you're going to learn how to navigate the interface, use essential tools such as the Shape tool and the Pen tool, understand timelines and layers, all within the program. In the full course, you're going to go further than this. You're going to be creating full animations from scratch with project-based lessons. You'll find the link to the full course in the description. Let's get started. So there's a lot of components when it comes to After Effects, and it's a good idea to know exactly where everything lives so that when you get to the more complex projects, you get to just grab it on and move on with the rest of the process. So right over here, this is what shows up after I click on New Project. Essentially, this is the window you're going to start with when you open up After Effects. Over here, the main component is the things that you've made before, but if this is the first time you're opening After Effects, this area may be filled with some like new updates, or maybe it's just empty. But for me, because I have used After Effects, there are some previous projects. It tells me the name, the type of project, which is usually AEP, stands for Adobe After Effects, just After Effects project actually. Tells you the time, so 11 months ago, and then you can switch it out to the most recent to the least recent. It also tells you the size on the end. You can search for something through your recent files. On the top right is your Adobe account. You should see your profile picture there. If you click on it, it's going to open a new browser tab where it takes you to adobe.com. On the left side is things that are new, updates. And if you click on it, this is what you see. This may also pop up when you first open After Effects, and then you can just see what are the new things you can look at. There's a search bar. You can search for things like a project, a certain tool, that sort of thing. And then on the left side is where usually you would go to start something. So first there is something called Team Projects. This is for times where you have multiple contributors on one Adobe After Effects project. So when you make a new team project, this window pops up. You're going to give it a name, a description, and you're going to add collaborators. So you're going to be putting in their emails associated with your Adobe account. And then they get a notification, you start the project, and that's all good to go. You can also open a team project, which already existed. And you can see I don't have anything right now, but if you did, it would show up here. You click on it, it's going to load up, and then you can proceed. And then we have the Learn button. If you're not sure how some things work, you can come here for some Adobe tutorials. They're really straightforward. You can see they're 3 minutes long, nothing too crazy. You can also go to the other ones. And if you want even more, you can go to their official website. The homepage is where we're currently. We have Open Project. Now, these two are not the same thing as a team project because you're the only collaborator. So these are sort of like private projects. Of course, you are still able to share them, but you're not allowed to, add multiple people at the start of it, where they could all come into the same project and, tweak things around. So Open Project is going to ask you to click on something on your computer, like an AEP file like this, and just like continue from where you left off. But we're going to start a new project, which is all from scratch. So when I click on this, I'm brought back to this window, and you can see it didn't really ask me to name my project or save it somewhere because that's something you would do after you've done something here. Because these files do tend to end up being pretty heavy, so that's why they do it. So right over here, we're seeing the timeline down here. If you've done any sort of like video editing projects, it basically works the same. There are some minor differences, which I'll get into in a different lesson. But this is where you get to see the type of medias that you've dragged in, how long they are, if you want to trim, split, duplicate, that's all going to happen right below. On the left side, we have our project panel. This is where all your files are going to be imported. Tells you the name, the type, the size, frame rates, and other things. This main area is going to be for your playback. So whatever you're playing, so you have a video down here, you get to watch that video right over here. Currently, there isn't anything there because we don't have anything imported. And it's actually asking us to make a composition, which I'll get into what that is in a bit. On the right side is all of our panels. Now, panels are specific to a certain action or a certain tool. For example, we have the content aware fill panel, lets you, do this action, which is to fill in an area with other parts of the clip. For example, let's say you have a video of a bird flying across a really nice landscape. You want to get rid of the bird. You will use this panel to target that bird, and After Effects is going to use the rest of the video to kind of fill in that empty spot that resulted from you taking out that bird. So that's one example of the panel. We have the effects and presets. So you can put like, I don't know, a black and white filter over your video and so many more. We have an audio tab, works with audio, a line tab, and other stuff up here. Now, these are not the only panels you're going to be working with, because if you go to Window, you can see all of these different things. There's a check mark next to the ones that are currently enabled. You can see Align has a check mark, and it's right over here, but Brushes does not have a check mark because it's nowhere to be seen. If I want to work with the Brushes panel, I would just click on it once, and it's going to appear. Now, when I go back, Brushes is also checked. It removed Align to make some space, but if I click on Align again, it's going to show up. So that's how you kind of switch out the ones you don't need. If you want to manually get rid of a panel, let's say I have no audio to work with, there's this hamburger menu at the end. You click on it, close panel, and it's out. If you felt like you were overwhelmed with all the panels, that's how you get rid of them. Bring them back with the Window tab right here. So that's just a general overview of this main part. We have some tools up here. A lot of them are grayed out right now because there's nothing on our project. We have the Home tool, which takes us back to where we were. We have the Move tool, which is what we have currently, the Hand tool, Zoom, Tilt, Text, and all the other goodies. We have something called Snapping, which helps when you're dealing with a lot of little layers, making sure that they're like rightfully aligned, equally spaced. And then up here, we have some workspaces. Now, workspaces are things that you can generate so you only deal with a certain number of panels, specific panels at a time. For example, we have something called Default, which is what we're seeing right now. There's a Review workspace. So you can see the panels shifted a little bit. So now we have more of the timeline. We have some effect controls and project panel, and then we have our playback speed. So the purpose of this workspace is for me to just review what I have, make some changes down here, maybe trim something, add a different picture or something like that. And therefore, I don't need all the extra things that the default workspace was providing. If I want to do a small screen, it's going to look like that. We have a standard one. We also have libraries. It brings in your Adobe library on the side. You can also make your own panels. So let me just go over here. Let's say you just want to work with color. So it kind of pushed the playback to the side. It has Lumetri scopes. Right here, this is only regarding color. So you can see how this workspace is prioritizing coloring and like color grading and stuff like that. And if you want a workspace to show up here, let's say you really work with text a lot, you can go to Edit Workspaces, and then in Bar, you just grab text, pull it up, maybe put it after default. When you click OK, we now have text right over here. All right, I'm just gonna go back to default, and let's get started by bringing in something, making a composition so we can see a little bit of how that works. So there are two ways to start a project in Adobe After Effects. The first one is to make a file in After Effects, a composition, which is the simplest thing to do. So you can either make it in here or you can turn a footage into a composition. So if I click on this, this is going to be basically the file that's going to contain all your edits. So let's call this my first project. There's going to be some settings. I would leave them all at default unless you know what exactly it is that you want to do. But we have some presets regarding the resolution. So if you want to do 4K, social media, or anything like that, you can easily click on one of these presets, or you can put in your own width and height. We also have some aspect ratio. I'm going to leave that as default. Frame rate. That depends on what you're trying to do. If you want to do a very high quality slow motion animation, you're going to have to increase the frame rate so that there's more frames per second. So the higher this number is, the more precise it is, but at the same time, it's going to make your file very heavy. So don't increase it unless you have to. We have resolution. You can turn it into half, third, quarter, or full. And then we have the duration of your composition. So if you know you want to make a 1 minute video, this is the place where you would put 1 minute, or else it's going to be too short for your purpose. So make sure start time code is 0 so that it starts from the beginning. But over here, you can kind of switch out the time. So let's say I do want to make a 1 minute video. Just going to change the 2 into 1. We have background color. You can click on it, choose anything else. I'm going to leave mine as black. You can also use the eyedropper tool to grab a color that's on the screen. Let's say this grayish black is what I want to do. And then on the advanced tab, we have some stuff that are, regarding motion blur, camera angles, and that sort of thing. For your first project, you don't really need to worry about this. We also have a 3D renderer if you're doing a 3D project. But like I said, this is like the basic first project. So once I have everything, I'm going to click on OK. So now you can see my playback doesn't have that composition button, but that dark gray color that I chose. And then down here is that timeline I was telling you about, and I could see that it's exactly 1 minute. So it's going from 10 seconds, 35, 55, and then 60. This lets me move around my video, which currently is just a picture. But on the left side in the project panel, you can see that my project is right over there. I could add in a video right now, add a music, a picture, whatever I want to do. And now I'm able to add things inside this composition. So if it's a music, it's a video, an image, this is the place I would do the importing. So I'm just going to double click on this empty space and I'm going to bring in like a video or something to show you exactly how that works. And I'll also bring an audio and an image so we can see the different types of medias and how they play out in After Effects. So I just uploaded 2 things. One of them is a video and one of them is an image. And I just want to show you this thing that pops up when you do that. So when you upload things, import things, it's going to ask you to either turn that into one composition, so one file, or multiple. So if you want to put this into a single project, you would do single composition. Multiple composition is going to create 2 of these rather than just one. There's also some options down here. So if I want to do a single dimension, I could choose, these are the names of my 2 files, which I made with Firefly. You can decide where this composition takes the dimension from. So one of my images is like a 4:3. The video is a 16:9 in terms of ratio. So it's just asking me which one I want to do. And then it's talking about the still duration. I'm going to leave mine at like 2 seconds. You can add it to render queue to export it. I'm not going to do that. And then we have sequence layers, which is not going to be applicable for what we're going to do. But in the further lessons, when we look at Adobe Photoshop files or Illustrator files, the layers is going to be very important. So I'm just going to do multiple compositions because I don't want them to be one thing. And you can see that grays out that first component. Click OK, and now we have multiple things. So you can see some of them are typed composition, while the others are regular formats. So this one is a video, so it's typed QuickTime. If I click on it, double click on it, this new footage layer opens up. So this is our project with the dark gray. This new thing is just this video. So I can't do anything regarding the project inside of this because this is just the footage. So I'm just able to see what is the video that I just imported. And if I hit the space bar, it's just gonna play and I get to see if this is like the video I want. And we also have like a playhead right here, so I could go back and forth. And this green bar down here, and you can see it also shows up in this timeline, is regarding how rendered your file is. So if it's not all the way green, you may experience some lagging. So when you hit enter to play the video, it may just kind of glitch a little bit. That's because After Effects is preparing it for playback. So it needs to kind of load, similar to like when you're streaming, it needs to load a little bit. This is the same concept, except it's local. All right, so when I'm happy with this, I could just hit X right here and I'm back to my original place. So that was a video, and we also have an imported JPEG. I could also see the files here. You can see the image does not have a frame rate because it's an image, but my video has a frame rate of 24 frames per second. If I double click on the image, there's my dog. There's no playhead because there's no motion. I just get to look at this picture and see what I'm dealing with. And that's how you import. Now I'm just going to import an audio to show you the difference. And then we would have all three main types of media that you would import into After Effects. So I just uploaded a audio, WAV, that's the format. Another way that you can upload if you don't want to double click here is to just open your file explorer and just click and drag it onto that little box. That's another way to do it. But we can see that my audio, when I click on it, has the little sound waves. It tells me the name of it, the duration, and some additional information. It's like 2.8 megabytes. So when I double click on this, I do get a playback because it's an audio. I think this is a sound effect. So yeah, I just have some sound effects that I got from the internet. And now I have my three main file types. So now we know how to import things into After Effects, how to find our panels, how to remove the ones we don't need. And we're basically ready to start doing some things inside this program. So we're back in our project from the previous lesson. As you can see, I only have my composition named my first project, and currently there's no layers inside. I'm just going to make a very simple solid layer, which is just a color. So we're just going to right click on the timeline, new, solid. So let's call this my background. We're going to keep the same width and height as the composition, and then this is where you choose your color. So click once, decide what you want. I'm just going to do a simple white. You can also use the eyedropper tool to grab another color, but for me, I'm just going to keep it very simple and choose white. When you're done, click OK, and now we have this white screen. So now something does pop up in the timeline, and that's our first layer. But don't worry too much about all these different buttons and like how you bring these in here. That's all for the next lesson. So right now, just to give you a quick understanding of the preview, we are really zoomed in into the canvas. But if you just go over here and hit fit, this is actually how big our composition is. So just make sure you're on fit and not like 400%. The thing next to it is about the sample rate. So the more it samples, the higher the resolution is going to be. And if you're working on complex, let's say animations or VFX, you may want to lower this so that your computer isn't constantly trying to load all these different effects, and you can proceed in a faster manner. So just think of that streaming analogy. If you're trying to watch with a very bad internet connection, that's not going to work out that well. But because I'm just dealing with a simple shape and maybe some text, I'm going to leave mine at full. If you do lower it, you may notice that what you see in the preview panel is going to be a little bit pixelated, but that's not from your original work. That's just the way After Effects is going to temporarily interpret your work so that it could load faster. Let's just keep it at full. And now we're going to explore the different tools. So the move tool is pretty self-explanatory. You just move things around. And so far we've been using the move tool. So it lets you click on things, select, deselect. And then we have something called the hand tool, which allows you to move things. So right now this is our canvas. And now you can see there's a hand. I'm able to move this, but with the hand tool, I can't really grab the layers. So that's the main difference. We also have the zoom tool. We don't really have anything on the screen for me to use it. So I'm just going to skip right into something that's going to give us something to work with. And that's going to be our shape layer. So currently it's a rectangle, but you do see there's a tiny little triangle at the edge. And that just shows you the other shapes you're able to make. So if you long click on it, we have a rectangle, rounded rectangle, an ellipse, polygon, and a star tool. I'm just going to go with a simple rectangle. When I selected that tool, you may have noticed that these two popped up and something over here. So every time you choose a new tool, it's going to come up with its own property panel. So let's choose the color of the inside of our rectangle. Let's do a bright red, and I'll give it blue stroke. 30 pixels. Let's click and drag to make our shape. If you hold down Shift, it's going to be a fixed aspect ratio. If you hold down Shift and Alter option, it's going to expand from the center. So I'm going to let go of Shift and Alt. And then when I'm done, click away. So Once I click away, I still have that star next to my cursor that indicates that I'm still on the shape tool. So if I do anything, I'm just going to make another shape. Command or Control Z. So now I could use the selection tool, which you can also grab quickly by hitting V on your keyboard, and I'm able to move this around. This is our very basic shape. It does let you rescale it from the corners, squeeze it, flip it. And again, if you hold down Shift, that's going to be fixed. It's going to be like proportionate. If you hold down Alt or Option, everything is going to happen from the center. So even if I squeeze it, you can see the center mark is not changing. Let's Command or Control Z to undo that. So now we can look at the properties. If you ever wanted to change your color again, make sure this layer is selected. You can see rectangle 1 is this guy. We have that selected, so I could just go in here and give it a different color. And then the same thing for stroke. Let's do like a bright red. The 30 next to it is the thickness of your stroke. So if you just go over it, you can make it thicker, thinner. And if you don't want any stroke at all, you just click on the word stroke and this thing pops up. You can just hit this. You can do it solid color. You can even do a gradient stroke or a radial gradient. There's also a blending option, so you could blend it into the layer underneath, but we don't really have a layer, so I'm not going to get into this right now. Then there's the opacity, which is how visible this stroke is. Click OK. If you're not seeing a preview, you may have this turned off, so just make sure this is checked. Click OK, and the same thing applies to fill. So if you click on the word fill, we have no fill, solid fill, which is what we've been doing so far, linear gradient, and a radial gradient. And then the same thing with opacity, blending options, and the preview. Click OK once you're done. So now on the right side, that was the panel that popped up when we first selected the shape tool. But if I go over there for a second, we can see that this whole thing expanded because now we have a shape. So before it was just this guy and it was grayed out. But now we have layer transform. So how we choose to transform this rectangle, which you could also do with the move tool. This is called transforming. But you can change the position manually or put in a number if you want. You can scale it up or down, rotate it, change the opacity, and change the anchor point. Now the anchor point is actually the thing that's holding this shape together. So if you want to rotate it, you want it rotated on one anchor point. So for example, this guy right here is not exactly in the center. So when I'm rotating it, you can see that it's not exactly aligned. But to change the anchor point, all you do is move these guys. So I could kind of guess where the center is, or we could do a shortcut. Let me actually undo all these rotations. So now you can see the anchor point is not in the center. So no matter what I do, it's not going to be geometric. But if you hold down Command or Control and double click on this tool, which is the anchor point, it jumps right to the center. So I don't have to guess where it is, and this way everything is nicely done. And now from the numbers on the right side, I could see that it's 97.2 and 55.1. So that would have been really hard for me to guess. All right, so this is your transform. You do see these clocks on the side. This is something we're going to get into later, but essentially they are for animations. Next, we have layer contents. So the way it works in After Effects is that you have a shape layer, but you can have multiple shapes in one layer. So right now I only have rectangle 1, but if I were to grab this layer and get another shape, let's long click, get a star, put it in the corner, you can see that the polystar is within the shape. So I didn't make a new layer. You can see it's one layer, but now it holds two shapes. You are able to make a separate one, but it's just for organization purposes. So if I click away and I make my star now, that's going to be a separate shape layer. And now we can see that over here, I'm only dealing with that layer. So that's the main difference. I'm going to delete that, go back here, and you can hide the layers so that you could work with whichever you want first. And just keep track of the way your layers work. Again, we're going to get into layers in the next lesson. Next thing is the shape properties. You're going to get the same property panel for text, for any sort of brush stuff, images if you have some, So just look over here to see what are the options you can work with. The first thing is the size. So this is different from scale. You may have noticed before we were using this guy, scale is gonna go zoom in and zoom out, whereas the size is actually working with the size of the shape. So if you don't want to lose any details, work with the size here, but just don't mix these two up because they're not, it's the same thing. Next thing we have roundness. So that's gonna round the edges for us. We have the stroke color, which is the same thing up here. This is the options with the gradients. We have the stroke width. You can see it's matching with what we have up here. Then we have something called line and join cap. So this is going to be, let me zoom in here. I'm going to use the zoom tool actually. Grab it and let's go in one of the corners. Then use the hand tool to bring the canvas a little down. All right, switching back to the move tool. So we have something called line cap and then we have line join. So any shape is essentially lines, just some of them are merged, whereas some of them aren't. Right now, looking at the red, we have two lines joining in from bottom and top. And this current option doesn't really apply because it's not a standalone line. So I'll show you what that looks like with the pen tool. That's for later. But because we have two lines joining and we have this corner, I get to change the way that corner looks with these things. So we have midder, which is this sharp edge, but I could round it up by clicking the next one. You can see it rounded, or do bevel. So it looks like that. Next is the fill color, which is the same thing as above. And then we have shape transform. It's the same things up here, but this is for the layer itself and this is for the shape itself. So they're different. We also have the alignment here. It lets you, position it in the middle, bottom, top, left, right. And it's aligning it to the composition. But if you had another layer, you would choose it here. So that's our shape tool. There's a lot of options down here underneath rectangle. So I'm just going to close that up. Those are going to be more advanced stuff. We're just going to focus on how we can make a shape and how we can, change the basic things about it. So now that I'm done with the shape, I could just select it and then hit backspace and it's gone. So the next thing is the pen tool. So the pen tool, again, if you long click it, you're going to get a few options. So the first thing, the most basic thing is the pen tool, which is the first option. Again, you get a fill and a stroke thing because you can think of this as like a pencil that you're using to draw. I'm going to remove the fill and then get myself a stroke. Let's keep the red and do like 30 pixels. And now you can see I have a pen and a star for my cursor. So anything you make with a pen tool is considered a shape. It's just the way that it comes about that's a little different. So let's say I want to make a line. There's my first point, and immediately you can see I got a shape layer, and I'll just make another point. So now we have a 30-point bright pink line, which I made with the pen tool. So I couldn't really use the shape tool because this is not exactly a known shape, it's just a random line. But on the right side, you can see that we're getting the exact same options as we did for the shape tool. The only difference is the line cap, which is the thing that I was referring to. So let me zoom in on the edge of my line. And this is regarding how the stroke acts around the point here. So right now it's a butt, so it's like the end of it. You can see it's kind of cut in half, but I could round it up like that, or I could make it a square. So that's the only difference. Everything else is pretty much the same thing. But let's talk about how we can use the pen tool and like make different things with it. If you hold down the spacebar, you're able to activate the hand tool. And then I'm just using the trackpad on my computer to zoom in and zoom out. So those are just some quick shortcuts. So let's delete this, backspace, hit G on our keyboard for the pen tool, and try to make some weird shapes. So let's do like a shape like this. When I close it up, I'm now able to add a fill color. So let's add this blue again. And you can also see that the anchor point is not in the center. So use the trick that we learned last time. Command or Control, double click on this. There we go. So you just have to click away first. So let me just undo that to show you again. So grab your shape until you see this middle anchor point come up. For you, it may be like over here. But just hold down Command or Control, double click, and it goes right in the middle. All right, so pen tool, we're gonna just put this away. There are a couple of options down here. So first of all, let's grab our shape, long click. We have something called add vertex tool. So a vertex is essentially the little points that you make to make the shape. So we did 4 points, 1, 2, 3, 4, just all the corners. But let's say I want to add another corner. Let me just grab my shape. Okay, I just went on path and I could just add a couple right over here. Now, right now it doesn't really look that different, but essentially I'm now able to grab with my move tool this new point to kind of like stretch out the shape and make something interesting with it. So if you made your shape, you change your mind, you can always add a vertex point. And you can see there's a plus right now. And let's say I want to delete a vertex point. I change my mind. There's a minus next to my pen. Just click once on the thing that you don't need. And I'm just going to switch this to a triangle, just like that. Next up is the convert vertex tool. So right now we're getting very sharp lines, very sharp connections, but I could just round this up and try to get a nice curve. So double click on one of the points and now we get a round curve. We're getting these two little lines, and that's essentially how much each side is curving. So the longer you stretch it, the more that curve is going to be. The shorter it is, the sharper it's going to be. And you can just like switch this around. Same thing for the other side. And again, if you change your mind, you don't want it to be round, you just double click on that same point and it goes back to that sharp triangle. The next thing is a mask feather tool. Right now we don't have a mask exactly, but masking is something you do when you want to contain a certain part of that layer and only show half of it, let's say. So currently I don't have a mask, but the reason why there's a mask feather tool in the pen categories because you make mask usually with the pen tool, but that's something a little bit more advanced. So that is my pen tool. That's all you can do. Same options over here. You can always like go in. Notice that there's a star next to my pen here, but when I go on that path, it becomes a plus. So that's how you know if you're making adjustments to your current shape or you're making a new one. So if I just make a few lines here, but then if I make a new one, you can see that it made shape too. So just look at what's next to your cursor to figure out what it is that you're doing. Now let's look at our next tool, which is pretty big and important, and that is the text tool. So I'm back in the same project. I just deleted my shape layer by selecting it and hitting the backspace. But right here, you can see the T, that's the text tool. You can activate it by holding down Command and T at the same time. That's Control T on Windows. So if you click on it, you're going to get this T next to your cursor, which indicates that you're going to make a text layer. When you click once, you're going to get like a tiny dot, but you can see right here, we got a new layer called empty text layer. And then on the right side, just like the shape tool, we're getting all these new components. So with that selected, I didn't really click anything yet. I'm going to type in something. So it's really tiny already, but I could see I'm doing something over there. My font is just really small. So let's hit change this to fit. And while I have this selected, I'm gonna do Control or Command A, or you could just double click on the text to highlight the whole thing. So the first thing is the text properties. I'm going to skip the layer transform because it's the same thing for every layer, but we can see what I wrote for this text layer. So let's first of all increase the font size so we can see what we're dealing with. You can also do a drop down menu and choose one from here. We can choose the font and the style. So let's do something bold. We have regular. This is the options for each of the font. So it's going to be different for each one. You can tell there is some options with this little triangle. You can see how Jumble doesn't have it, but the one above it does. You can also get more fonts from Adobe Fonts or download and buy it from another provider. So that's the font size. We have the leading, which is going to be for paragraphs where you have 2 lines, so that that option decides the space between the 2 lines. But I only have 1 line, so right now I'm not going to touch it. We have the tracking, so the space between the 2 letters, the letters basically. I could increase it or decrease it like so, or just type in something like 0. Let's actually move this guy a little bit towards the middle. Double click to select it. We have the fill color. You can just treat this as a shape right now. Decide the color. Let's make it black. You can choose a stroke as well. And then this right here is the stroke width. So right now it's 1 pixels, but you can increase it like so. We also have the line join. So this is something we looked at in a previous lesson for the shape, but you get to do the same thing for the text. However, we don't really have lines here, so you're not able to see a difference, but we still have that option. There's also an eyedropper tool for fill and stroke if you ever wanted to grab something from the screen. Now we have something down here, which is the relationship between the stroke and the fill. So is the stroke over the fill or is the fill over the stroke? You can see that makes a difference. So which one's the priority? And then you can just set this for all of your text if you want to. So I'm just going to do stroke over fill just to keep it interesting. And then we have the line height, the vertical scale basically. So you want to stretch it or not. Do 100 to bring it back. And then we have the width. So is it like squeezed or stretched? These are some artistic choices. This right here is a baseline shift. So where's that line? I'm just going to set it back to 0, which is the default. And next up we have something for characters. It's called sume. So if you have like Japanese or kanji characters, like how, squeezed or stretched those are. If you're working with Latin words, you don't really need to use this. And then we can automatically turn everything to all caps. Turn it all to lowercase, small caps. We could do superscript. We can do subscript. And then if you select it again, you undo that thing. We have ligatures, Hindi digits, and if you press on that, it just hides everything. So this is regarding your text, but let's say I wanted to do 2 lines. So let's do hello world, enter. This is a text. So now I have 2 lines, and there's a whole different category for paragraph right over here. So if you have worked with any sort of document program like Google Doc or Microsoft Word, it's pretty much the same thing here. We have left aligned, center text, right aligned. We can do indents here. So this is going to be the left margin. We could move the first, add a space before the paragraph, do it after the paragraph, indent right, indent the first line if you want to do like a essay thing. We also have the text direction. So by default it's left to right, but you can do right to left as well if you're using a different language. And then right over here we have point text and box text. So this right here is called a point text because I just clicked on it on a point and it just gave me a text. But if you do a box text, it's going to maintain everything within the box. So if you are using paragraphs, think of it as like your writing space. And if I just click away, like I could just click and drag and define this as my box. And now you can see that this guy is selected. So I could just type a bunch of stuff and then treat this as like a Google Doc. But if I do point text, you can see that it removes the box and it just gives me that one line. So that's the main difference. And notice how the anchor is always far away from the center. So just like the shape tool, you can hold down Command or Control, double click, and it goes to the center. This way you get to work with the layer stuff, layer transforms in a nicer way. Alright, now the last thing is text animation. This is going to be the same thing with the other tools in regards to the little watch we have. So you could kind of make this text move slowly across your screen, fade it out, change the color. That's something we're going to look at later. But you also have some alignment options, just like we did with the shape tool. So it looks like that. So that's the text tool, pretty fun to work with, and you can see that we have our T layer right now indicating that this is a text. And if you look at your cursor, you can see that it's different from a star, and this just shows that you're going to put in a few words. So let's delete this and look at our next tool, which is the brush tool. So regarding the brush tool, it's a little bit different, the brush tool and the ones on the right side of it, because you have to actually go into a layer to be able to use them. So right now, if you look up here, it says composition, my first project. So right now, if I try to click it with the brush tool, you can see nothing really happens. I'm just moving my canvas around. So in order to go inside a layer, you have to double click on that thing. So my background is technically a layer. And now up here, it says layer of my background. And then you can see my cursor is a little bit different. And now if I click on it, I'm actually able to draw stuff, which is something I wasn't able to do in composition. So I'm going to hit Command or Control Z, grab my brush tool, try to do it here. It doesn't work. So keep that in mind. You can switch out between your composition and layer up here. And if you accidentally close this, don't panic. You can just double click on your solid layer. And whatever you do inside this layer is going to show up in your composition. So if I do a smiley face, go back to composition, it's going to be there. But you can see that there's no extra shape layers down here because we did everything within the layer itself. Okay, let's go back here and look at some of these stuff we can do. The brush tool doesn't really have any sub-tools. You can see that if I long click, nothing happens. But you can activate it with Command or Control B. We do have some stuff on the right side. So right now, if I scroll down, we have something called the Paint panel. And we also have something called Brushes. And if you're not seeing those, just go to Window, get the Paint panel, and this is what you're going to get. So we have just the fill color actually, there's no stroke. Double click, decide on something you want, click away, and now you get green. So it's pretty straightforward. We have opacity, which is how visible your strokes are going to be. So this is 12%, you can see it's faded. And then we have flow. So this one, you can think of it as how much ink comes out of your brush. So I'm going to increase opacity to 100, flow to 34, and you can see that it's still faded, but it's almost as if we don't have enough ink. And this is it at 14%. If I do 3, I'm still seeing my brush. It's just very faded. We have some blend mode options, some channels for colors, and then we have duration. So the duration thing comes from the animation aspect. Basically, how long is this paint stroke going to be on the screen? By default, it's on constant, so no matter where I go in my timeline, I'm still going to see these strokes. However, I could do this for only one frame and maybe do a frame by frame animation if I choose to do that. So let's try to go to the beginning before I made this painting and do single frame. So now I'm going to do like a few numbers. Let's increase our flow back. So if I do 1 and then I move forward, you can see the 1 disappears. That's because it was only there for one frame. I'm just going to go back to find my 1. There it is. So let's move to the next frame by just moving the playhead. Let's do a number 2. Now you can see it goes from 1, 2. We'll do a 3, and so on forth. So apart from the stuff down here, we also have the brushes panel. Again, if you're not seeing this, just go to Window and select brushes. So brushes is only unique to the tools that I mentioned that need to go in the layer itself. And essentially, it's the way the tip of your brush works. So right now, when we started to draw, it's really hard to see. Oh, we're on right on. Let's go to constant and then like draw something. So this is a very hard and round brush. Like there's nothing interesting about it, but I could change the way it looks. So let's go to like number 45. You can see it has an interesting shape. And now if I draw, I have this like sort of like a calligraphy pen vibe to it. And it's a lot different from what we had before. And I could just switch between them. We're seeing a preview over here. So this is going to be different. We have like a soft spray paint effect too. And this just goes on and on. There's a bunch of options you can look at. I'm going to hit Command or Control Z to undo. And then we have some stuff down here regarding the brush itself. So let's choose something big, like number 19. And I'm going to do like 1 stroke. So you can decide on the diameter of this brush, the angle, which doesn't really work with a circle, but if you had one of these, you can like decide the angle. You can see it's kind of switching around. You can work with the roundness. We can work with the hardness, so no feathering on the edges, and then the spacing. The lower it is, the smoother the flow. But if you add more spacing here, so let's do like 100 or 200, it like doesn't connect and we get these trails instead. But if I lower my spacing to, let's say, 2%, it's a very smooth line. So that's what spacing's for. We also have some stuff regarding the brush dynamics. This one usually works with if you have a stylus or a trackpad, but I'm just working with a mouse right now. So no matter what I click, it's gonna be the same thing. But if you had like an Apple Pencil or a stylus, if you press harder, it may give you more ink. And if you stroke lightly, it's gonna give you like a softer look. So you can turn this off if you're not using any of those, but you can see there's a bunch of options here. There's one for angle, roundness, opacity, and flow. The same things we have access to if we don't have a stylus. All right, so this is the paint stuff. Nothing too crazy, it's very straightforward. We do have the erase tool, which is the exact opposite of the brush tool, since it's gonna remove stuff. So I'm just gonna use the same tools and options, same options for my erase tool to just go over and delete my layer. So notice how we're getting black and not white, even though the background is white. What's happening right now is that we're deleting the layer source, which was our background, and the paint. So if you go down here, you can see that is exactly what is selected. But if I only want to delete the paint, I would go to paint only. And now I'm only deleting the stuff that came above my white background. I could do last stroke only, so the last thing I went over, and I'm sort of undoing what I did. So layer source is this guy, paint is what you painted. Let's delete everything. And then the same things apply from the paint tool, the brush tool, so opacity, angle, hardness, all of these things are pretty much the same. Now we do have something called the clone stamp tool. This is going to be more prevalent when you have something to clone. So I'm just going to go over one of the stuff that we imported. I'm going to go back to composition. You can see now we have an empty file. But let's go over to our imported JPEG. So I'm going to double click on that and now I'm inside footage, the name of my file. So that's our layer, composition, the footage. That's how we keep track. Let's use the hand tool to bring this in the middle and try the clone stamp tool. So right now we're getting the grayed out options. They're ready to use. So cloning basically just means copying a certain part of your work onto another part. So I just double clicked onto the image. I brought it into on top of the background layer, and then just make sure your source is the image, the name of your file. And then we have some presets. So we have a tiny brush again. I could increase the size. You can see the brush panel is available for me to use. I'm just gonna grab one of the harder ones. And now I could just start drawing, but you can see how nothing is happening. So with the clone tool, you have to actually sample an area you want to copy over. The way you do that is holding down Alt or Option. You can see that the cursor changes. Let's say I want to copy over this brighter part onto this darker part. So Alt or Option, click once, like go. And now we have a sample. So if I start drawing, you can see that I'm copying over exactly what's happening on the right side. And then we could just do that. So I could resample another place by holding down Alt or Option and like draw out something. That's basically what you do with the clone stamp tool. There are some presets here that you could make. So let's say you want to constantly use this hard round brush. You don't want to choose your dimensions, your diameter and angle every time. So you make yourself a preset by option clicking. So hold down Option, click once, and now this is something I could go to. I'm going to make another one here. There's some stuff down here regarding like the offsets, but I would just keep those as the default. We can reset them like this. Then we can choose the opacity and flow, but not so much the colors because you're just copying over what exists already on the file. And that's pretty much the clone stamp tool. So let me just delete this image and then bring it in again. Then let's double click to go into the file again. So now I'm in the layer and not in the footage. That's the difference. So we looked at the clone tool, the erase tool. We then have something called rotor brush. This is something I'll have to get into later. Essentially lets you select your subject in a video. Let's say you have a ballerina dancing around. Instead of using the pen tool to go over each of the points, you can use the rotor brush for it to select your subject throughout the whole video. But right now we don't really have an option for this. I mean, you could select it, like right now I accidentally made a selection, but immediately you can see I get a rotor brush and refine edge tab in my layer. Let me just call this dog real quick. Right click dog. So rotor brush, I want my dog separated. So let's go over roughly around the dog. When I let go, you can see that After Effects made a selection. There's a purple edge. That's how you know it was selected. You can extend it by going over something. Like here it missed one of the paws. Go over like that. You can also zoom in for more precision. Use the space bar to move the canvas around. So this is the areas it selected. This is the area it didn't. There we go. And then I could select the eyes and just keep going. So that's the rotor brush tool. It's helpful when you want to make a mask. I'm going to get into masking later, but generally you would use the brush panel to decide the edges and the diameter. All right, so let's delete this and move on to our last tool, which is the puppet pin tool. Now this guy is actually pretty interesting because you can really imagine a puppet and the points that you're using to control the puppet. So we also had the refine edge tool. This is for hair and all, but we'll get into that later. So when you long click the puppet pin tool, we have position, start, bend, advance, and overlap. This will be its own lesson, but just to give you a rough idea, you select a point. Let's do another one on the ear. And then you basically move those points throughout time. So let's go to mesh 1. And then you can see in deform puppet pin 1, which is this guy, puppet pin 2. And what we did right now was make 2 keyframes. Keyframes I'll talk about later, but it's basically changes over time. So in this keyframe, the image is perfectly still. But let's say in like a few seconds forward, I'm gonna open these up until you see the clock. 2 seconds or more forward, I want the ears to like move a little bit. So I'm just gonna go over either one and kind of like stretch it out like that. There's a nicer way to do it, but let's just understand the basics. And now you can see when I go before these 2 dots, hit enter, my image just expands. So that's how the puppet pin tool works. You can imagine if you have a character that's not, set on a background, you can move their arms around, move their eyebrows, and that sort of thing. But you're not getting anything on the side here. You can see everything grayed out. Everything is done within here. And once you learn the animation basics lesson, this will make more sense to you. But for now, I just wanted to give you guys an overview of all of the tools before we move on to the layers panel and how the timeline works. So let's go ahead and delete dog and close this. Go back to our composition. So previously we imported these things into our project. We have a video, we have an image, and we have an audio, as well as a composition, which we learned is how we make projects inside After Effects. So we made this solid layer. I'm just going to delete that for now and we'll come back to that later. So the most basic component that you can import into After Effects is an image. Not a lot going on there. It's a static thing. And once you have it in your project panel, which as you recall, you can double click here, bring in your media, or you could just drag and drop it from your file explorer. I'm just going to drag this into the My First Project composition. Now notice that there's for everything that you import, there's going to be the thing itself and a composition version of it. So basically when I double click on that composition, that's just a project made from that media. So this project only has the photo in it. If I go to the video composition, it only has the video in it. So that's the logic that's happening right now. Just to make this easier, I'm going to rename this stuff in my project panel, which you can also do by right-clicking, rename, or just hitting enter. I will call this audio, hit enter, and it's done. Same thing here. This is, I could tell from the type, this is our video. That is also our video. This is our image. And because the file types are different, it's not telling us that there's already something named, image or video. All right, so I dragged image, you can see it updated the name as well, into my first project. Right away, I could just scroll up into the property panel, grab my image, or just grab my image and kind of scale it in like that, hold down shift, and try to fill it in to my canvas. There's my dog. And then I let go. So I had my layer selected, I made my adjustments, then you let go and it's unselected. You can also use the layer transform panel, which we looked at in the previous lessons, to scale it like this, move it left and right, rotate it, or whatever that you want to do. So in terms of the layer, let's look at what we have right now. So the first thing is this eyeball, which is going to hide that layer. So you just click it once and it, hides and unhides it. The next thing is regarding types of medias that have some sort of audio. You can mute them like that. You can see the image doesn't have any. The next thing is this singular button, which lets you only work with one layer at a time. So let's say I have like a video on the same screen. I'm going to drag it above. So there's my video, but I only want to work with my image. If I click on the solo thing, you can see that the video goes out even though it's still visible and it's above my image. If I let go, it comes back. The next thing is locking. So if I lock my image or my layer, I can't move it anymore. And this is great if you have a lot of smaller layers and you're afraid you're gonna accidentally move one of them. It's a good idea to lock them in place once you've made your transformations. The next thing is this flash button that goes into the properties of the layer, but I'm going to come back to that after I tell you what the rest of these things are. We have color tags in After Effects, which is really helpful when you have a lot of layers. So let's say all your images are red, all your videos are yellow, and that way you can keep track of everything. We have it numbered here, so if you have multiple layers, it'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4. The names will show up here as well. And if you change the name, it's going to update. We have some animation stuff here, which for the image right now, it's not really important. But let's see over here. We have some motion blur, for example, adjustment layers, and then a 3D layer. So this is actually how you enable a layer to be three-dimensional. That's going to have its own lesson. We have something called parent and link. So this is when you have more than one layer in your panel, your timeline. So let's go ahead and bring in our video, put it underneath, and let me just show you what that looks like. So when you put something underneath another layer, it basically hides behind it. But if you want it to be in front, you just click and drag it, drop it above. So let's say I want the movements of this video to be bound to the image before it. So all I gotta do is grab this squiggly thing, drag it onto my image, and now instead of moving my video, I could click on my image and move it around. And you can see my video is now kind of attached to it. Whereas if I didn't do this, so let's set this to none, and I move my image, the video stays where it is. So you can think of it as like a rope being tied to the wagon of this previous layer. And you can always switch out with different things. You can't do it to the same layer obviously, but you also have the option to choose the anchor here as well. So now that we know what these things are, let's look at those sub properties of each of the layers. So we're going to start with image. I'm going to delete the video for now. Grab your image and then click on this little triangle, the little arrow. The first thing that shows up is transform. These are going to be the same things that you see up here. And if you're not seeing this, you go to window and then choose properties. Open up transform and you get to see exactly these things. So opacity, rotation, scale, position, and anchor point. And because this is on the timeline, you're allowed to make animations with this. So let's say I want the image to be scaled up as it is right now, but then after 5 seconds, it zooms in a little bit. So because I turned on the clock, it's now tracking these movements. So in the beginning, this first diamond shape, this is called the keyframe. It's going to be zoomed out to 122%. If I go to the next keyframe, it's zoomed in to 180%. So that's what these little clocks are. You can see they're pretty much everywhere because After Effects is mostly animation. When I hit play, you can see that that zoom effect is happening. And we've done this in the layer properties. And if you want to, stop this, you just go to the beginning and just turn off the clock. Now we have our original image. So with images, this is like the only thing you can do. However, if you combine it with one of the shape tools or the pen tool, you get to create something called a mask. So let's hide everything. And I'm going to have my image selected, then choose like the rectangle. You can see my cursor is different. There's like a little black dot on top of a rectangle. Whereas if I click away, I have that regular star. So let's click this. And let's say I only want the face of my dog to be visible and I want to cut out everything else. You can do that by clicking and dragging and then letting go. So right now I have made a mask and you can see that that's within the layer right now. If I hide everything, we now have transform and mask. So I only have one mask, but that only happened because we went over it with the shape tool. Now there's a bunch of other properties for masking. First of all, you can lock it in place so you don't move it around by accident. We also have the option to decide how this shape is being interpreted. So is it being added, subtracted? Does it intersect with another layer, which we don't really have one right now? Does it lighten, darken? This is again dependent on another layer. But the two main ones is whether you want to add this or you want to remove that selection. I'm going to do add. You can also invert easily like this, but mine is pretty good right now. If you open up mask, you're going to get some options for that mask only. The first one is mask path, and notice the little watches on the side. That means I get to change the shape over time. So let's say I wanted to, if I grab the move tool, select this dude and like do this maybe. If I go back, you can see that there's a slow transition from my first shape to my second shape. Again, if I click on the clock again, it all goes away. We have mask feather, which talks about the edges of this mask. So currently, if I click away, you can see that it's a very sharp cut. But if I increase the feather, you can see how that softens out. That's going to be really helpful when you're trying to do like VFX, you're trying to do like demonize or something, you wanted to the effect to blend into that human figure. This is where all the magic happens. We have mask opacity. So how visible is that selection? And then we have mask expansion. So you could expand it from that selection or go the opposite way. We also have the little pig whips, which lets you, maybe if you have multiple masks and you already did your animation on another mask, instead of repeating the same numbers here, you could just kind of connect it to that other mask. So these things, we're going to get into them further on, but just so you know what these are, it's all regarding masking. Okay, so that is our image layer. Let's see how things look like for a different type of media, which is video. We'll video first, then we'll look at audio. So let me just delete image for now. And now we have our flower. So this is a good example of when you have motion, but let's say you have such a heavy file. Let's say this is like 10 gigabytes large and you're trying to play it back and it's just not loading. So right now you can see that this is on full and this whole line is green, which means After Effects has already rendered it. And if I hit play, it's just my regular video playing. But if I wanted to speed this up with my heavy files, I could drop this down to like a third. And you can see that the green bar disappears, but if I hit play, it comes back. And notice how the quality did go down. This was the thing I was talking about in a couple lessons back. So the lower you take it, the lower the quality gets, but at least you get to play back your video and, make your edits. So this video doesn't really have an audio, but if I increase this, you can see that we have the same transform properties. The only difference here is that, we have that playback issue, whereas with the image, we didn't. And then the audio is where we do have volume. You can see that there's no, eyeball because you can't really see the audio. but there is a mute and unmute button. If you open this up, we get a audio tab instead. And that's just for you to play around with the volume over time. So right now it's 0 decibels, but I could increase the volume for like a few seconds, take it down. As long as we have this stopwatch, I'm able to do some, changes over time. We have some waveform as well. If this helps you, you can look at the sound waves here and then make your transitions as you go. Let's delete that. Now let's look at the timeline. Those are just basically how layers work. In the further lessons, you're going to see how important they are when it comes to animations, masking, and just working with multiple layers at the same time. So let's look at the timeline. As we said, this is the playhead. It just lets you go over the video for a certain amount of time. But you are able to mark certain areas in your video. Let's say this is the part where I want to add a sticker. Instead of remembering that this is like 3 seconds 01, I could right click. Markers, add marker, or do the shortcut that's over there. And I get this thing basically marking this area. And I could just like go back and forth, do other stuff, and just come back to it. You can also leave comments. Let's say I'm dealing with a really long video and I'm gonna forget, maybe fix the colors. I could leave myself a comment. I could label it like red for urgent and then hit OK. So I'm gonna remember next time to come and fix this. And I could do multiple markers as well. So we'll do another one. Maybe add text, and you can do like pink here, just like that. If you right click again, markers, you can delete everything or lock them in place. Now let's talk about timelines and how you can alter videos and just any layer. So by default, the videos and audios are going to come into your composition the same way that they are. So if your video is only 3 seconds long, it's going to come in 3 seconds long. But with image, because it's static, you're able to alter how long it's on screen for. So you can see the difference. I just dragged in the image. It's, stretching across the entire composition, whereas the video is only 5 seconds long. So you can see that I can't really stretch the end of my video because it's not that long. But with my image, I can grab the end and decide how long I want this to be. And I could also like move it to the center. So if it's not highlighted here, it means that there's no image until this point, and then it disappears. You're able to do some basic video editing adjustments here. So let's do like copying, Command or Control D. It's gonna duplicate it, this exact same image, same position. Let's try that with like a little one. So you can either do Command or Control C and then Command or Control V to copy it. Now you have two. You can also do Command or Control D to duplicate, depends on which method you prefer. If you want, you can duplicate it from one point. So I could split this into two with Command Shift D or Control Shift D. So you can see it splits up, and I could take this half and put it somewhere else. You can also do a bunch of things by right clicking on that layer. So we have some masking, we have the shape path and mask, which is the same thing that we did earlier with the rectangle. You can decide on the quality, the switches, transform it, play around with the time. So if you want to make it slow motion, this is where you do it. This is reverse, but this is slow motion. So I could stretch it to, let's say, 150. It's going to stretch it out. And let me actually do that on the video. So I'll do Command or Control D. Let's stretch this out. So time stretch, let's do 150. You can see how the top one is now longer than the one below it. And if I hit play, it's in slow motion. This is our original. And then we can also speed it up the same way. So let's go to time stretch, and then just go below 100. So let's do like 30, and there is the fire. We have some freeze frames. We can blend frames together, 3D layers. The markers we talked about, blend them into each other. So let's actually try that. There's a lot going on here, but just to know what the categories are, this top one is going to darken the top layer into the bottom layer. This is going to add light to it. You can see there's like a thin line between each one. This is going to be focused on contrast. These are going to be some abstract stuff. These are for colors, and these are just with different channels. So let's say I want to do multiply. You can see how that darkened by combining into the bottom layer. And if I move this away, you can see how the areas that stand out are like the shadows. I'm going to like position them like this so we can better tell the different blend modes. Let's go back here. We could try something from the light category. You can see how the top layer is brightening up what's underneath. And then we can do one of the middle ones. Let's do like vivid light. Completely darkens it, but it does focus on contrast. So that's basically the clear difference between the brighter part and the darker part. And by the way, if I hide the bottom layer, the top layer, even though we did add that the blend mode, it looks pretty normal. So this only works when you're blending at least two things together. And if you don't want to do anything else, you just go back to normal. It gives you your original video back. We do have a bunch of effects in After Effects. These are specific to, let's say, a style, a element. You can work with frames. There's a lot of options here, and this is the same thing as effects and presets. We're going to use a lot of these going on in the course, but essentially you could look for an effect you want to do, for example, blur. Type it in, and then you can, let's see, which one do we want to put? Let's do a classic Gaussian blur. You drag it onto that layer. And then immediately the effect control panel shows up, which is going to control the effect that you just put on. So that's going to be different with every effect. For Gaussian blur, you only decide how blurry that effect is and the blur dimension. So vertical, horizontal, or both. And then you can see the little stopwatches on the side. I get to decide this change in blur over time. And if I change my mind, I don't want the blur anymore, I just hit backspace on the effect control. And like I said, there's like so many stuff you can do with audio, 3D stuff, keying, generating, and many more. Another thing that you can do with layers is try to organize it in your timeline. So we have a composition layer, but we also have something called a pre-compose, which is something you do within a project to keep things organized and not have like 200 layers in your timeline. At some point, color coding is going to get a little bit exhausting. So let's like try to do that. If I have that many, I can't keep track of which layer was related to the flower, which layer was related to the human subject. So to pre-compose and make a little group within this main project, you just grab the layers that you want to group, right click, and then just do pre-compose. It's going to ask for a name. Let's say flowers. When I hit enter, it like puts them into one thing. And I get to decide the duration and everything just like the rest of the layers. So let's do Command-Shift-D and delete the top layer. If I want to make changes to the stuff in here, you double click and you're now in the flowers pre-composition. And you get to treat these like, any other layer. So this will come in handy when you're dealing with animations. We're going to see that come in handy when we do the Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator lesson, because there's going to be a lot of layers that make up that scene that we're going to animate. But it's always a good idea to pre-compose different parts of it. So let's say we have a human subject and we want to animate their entire body. We will group every layer related to the face, every layer related to the arms, and that way we are able to have more control over every movement without going crazy over the amount of layers that we have. So right now it may seem like, why would we want to do a pre-composition, but later on it will be very helpful. Some minor things is the zooming down here. You get to zoom into your timeline and out. You can zoom into it as well like this from the top. You can exclude certain parts of your project by grabbing the end of your work area and let's say shortening it like this. So now when you export, this little area is the only thing that's going to go there. So let's say you have a big project, you want to do part 1, part 2. This is one way to split them. You get to move this around as well. Let's increase this. You can quickly make a marker here. So I just clicked it and I got 1. Let's go here, get 2. And of course you can double click on that marker to write a better comment. But by default, it will give you some numbers. Congratulations on completing this Adobe After Effects tutorial. If you would like to continue learning, we have our full dedicated course linked down in the description. Over there, you're going to go over a lot more, such as 3D design, 3D animations, 2D works, and so much more. That's going to be more project-based, and by the end of that full course, you probably know everything about the program. Not only do we go over animations and motion graphics, we also go over professional video editing. So you're going to be working with transitions, knowing how to make your own transitions, and then combining that with Premiere Pro or any other video editing platform. You'll find the full course link in the description. Thank you for watching this tutorial, and I hope to see you guys in the full course.